Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're continuing with our weekly series of Shirim on the light of Dovid HaMelech. And what we're going to talk about today is thinking. Generally speaking, we see our thoughts as something separate and apart from us, and separate and apart from God, as a frequency of thinking that enables us to process reality, to make judgments upon reality, and to plan in accordance to how we feel that we should handle reality. Thinking is a tool that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us. It's an instrument that is meant to contemplate, calculate, divide, and conquer reality. Seen as such, thinking is something that is separate and apart from the self itself. It's a tool that the self is able to utilize to contemplate and to domesticate reality. The problem with this perspective of instrumental thinking, where thinking is something separate and apart from the soul itself, as if it's just an extension of the soul, is twofold. On the one hand, because the thoughts are going to be emergent and conjured up within the perspective of the subject themselves, there's going to be endless room to be doubtful and skeptical as to the validity or the veracity or the authentication of the thought. Because if the thought is being conjured up in and of itself within my own mind, so then who's to say that there's any validity to it because I'm exposed and I am motivated by all of the various micro and macro systems that influence my thinking. Aside from the skepticism, which disables us from trusting our inner thinking, there's also going to be the question of the meaninglessness of thinking, because even if my thoughts are authentic, nevertheless, who's to say that my thinking has any benefit or any actualization or any import? If a thought is thought and it doesn't have a follow through and it doesn't get manifested in some real way, then what value is there to the thought? And again, these are two issues that emerge from the external nature of thinking, where thinking is just another strength that we do as human beings. It's not fundamentally, inherently bound up with the essence of the soul. And as such, it's not ontologically real. It's just a psychological tool. And so when I'm thinking, it's a thought that can either be true or not true because I'm the one thinking it. And furthermore, even if it's a true thought, there might not be any value that comes out of that thought if it doesn't lead to the next level. So there's an inner process of looking at thinking in a slightly different way that is clarified throughout the writings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Gra and the Tzaddikim, the Talmidim of the Arizal, rooted in the Zohar HaKadosh, which is that we have to reorient ourselves as to what thinking is. Machshava, processing information, processing reality, developing a real-time conception of what it is that I'm seeing outside of myself, most ready at hand, the things that are most obvious to me that demand the most thinking. When I think about what's happening, instead of looking at my mind as just an instrument, which is meaningless in and of itself, I need to begin to look at the nature of the unfolding process of my thoughts as the expression of the neshama itself. Neshama shenasat bi tahoirahi. The soul that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has placed within me is purified, meaning to say it comes from a place beyond human accountability, human behavior, human possibility. The place of Tahara that the neshama comes from is an ontologically rich and saturated place that is still the presence of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if the neshama is being drawn from that place and going down the number line until it congeals and reveals itself in our minds as our neshama, so then the thoughts that are conjured up in our mind are not simply accidental modes of reasoning that come from the bottom up, but rather they are fundamental drops of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light that are expressed from above to below. When a person begins to see their mind not as the site that conjures up thinking, but rather as the vessel that reveals the never-ending flow of thought that ascends and descends from a place far beyond human consciousness, so then the mind opens itself up to becoming a shliach, to becoming a messenger for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because the thoughts are not something that are separate and apart from HaKadosh Baruch Hu as if they are an interruption to the never-ending, undulating flow of divine light. But the thought is the access point that we have to witness the unfolding nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light in our minds itself. That the thought is a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, this intervention, this capacity to look at the thinking not as a separate thing that is removed from the neshama, and at best it could lead me back to the neshama, or as something that is separate and apart from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and something that could theoretically move me back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, The intervention of thinking to see the thought itself as the vehicle in which we get to encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The thought itself is a breath that emerges far beyond the mind. The thought that's thought within the thinking mind is ultimately the edge of a much deeper and far richer quality of expression that starts way beyond our conscious thinking. The bottom of thought takes place within the mind, but in truth, the frequency and the framing of thinking is a shlichus. It's a revelation of a light that's coming down through the particular valence of our own minds. What this does for us is it rectifies the two issues that the original way of thinking conveys. The first issue is that I have no reason to trust my thinking, because I'm the one who's conjuring up my thinking. And who's to say that there's any validity to the thoughts that I'm thinking? Who's to say that there's anything real about the comforting thoughts of Amunah that I think, if they're just being conjured up based on the instrumental nature of thinking? And furthermore, the second issue was that we don't value our thinking. But seen in the second way of thinking, which is that thought is an expression from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light above, down through the valence and the frequency of our own individualized mind, which is our neshama. So then on the one hand, we can trust our thinking because the thinking is something that is emergent rather than conjured up. It's not something that's coming from below to above. It's something that's coming from above to below. And therefore it can be trusted when it's expressed properly that the thought is an extension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ratzon from above. And the second issue, which is the meaninglessness of thought, also gets thrown out the window, because if the thought is an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light through my own neshama, so then of course it's meaningful. And irrespective of what the thought leads to, the thought is meaningful in and of itself because it's an imprint of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ratzon. This reorientation towards thinking takes the goal of experience from being something outside of ourselves that we have to get to, and it reveals that the first goal of experience is found within the self itself. In the first model of thinking, geula, redemption, is something that's out there, and only if I think about redemption can I eventually lead myself to actualized redemption. The second model of thinking is the secret of that we must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, for none but ourselves can free our mind, meaning to say that it is the thinking itself that is the nakuda of geula, that karveh al nafshi geula, when I think about geula, I'm already there. The thought is not some instrument that is meant to lead me to something else. The thought is that very place in and of itself. This revelation comes from the light of Dovid Malka Mashiach. It's shown through all of the tzaddikim, but we say it every day in Elul when we say, L'cha amar libi bakshu panai es panecha Hashem avakesh. David HaMelech is saying to himself, L'cha amar libi, my heart, Hashem, my heart yearns to you. My heart yearns to connect to you, to think about you. It wants to cultivate a relationship with you. It understands the fundamental necessity of having you present in each and every moment of my life. It knows the terror of feeling removed from you for even a second. But in the first model of thinking, where thinking is just an instrument that the human being is able to use to get to the goal that they want to go to. So when my heart is thinking about coming close to you, when my heart is yearning for closest to you, when my heart is feeling the comfort of being close to you, then I have to be skeptical and say, but who's to say there's any comfort in here? Who's to say that it's a real thought? Who's to say that this is something I can be thinking? Maybe I'm just keeping my head buried in the sand by thinking this thought. Maybe it's just the calm, warm feeling of ignorance is bliss and it's not real. Or what value is there of me thinking a thought of closeness to you? That's the first model of thinking, where the mind of the individual is seen as something that's separate and apart from the expression of the neshama, which is being breathed into the individual from HaKadosh Baruch Hu at every moment, unfolding itself in new colors. But when seen through the second redemptive lens of thinking, where the thought itself is an extension from above and it's a representation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, then when I'm thinking about you, Hashem, and when I'm thinking about coming close to you, and I'm thinking about yearning to cleave to you and finding you and drawing you down into my life and affirming your existence in the pockets of concealment in this world, it's no longer a question of what value is there. It's no longer a question of what authenticates or what validates this nature of thinking. The thought in and of itself is proof enough. The thought in and of itself is validation enough. If I'm thinking it, it's real. If I'm thinking a good thought about coming close to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then in that very thought itself is the closest that I seek out. And this is what David HaMelech is saying, L'cha amar libi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my heart is not whispering to you, I want to come close to you. My heart is on shlichus from you, whispering to me that I want to come close to you. Meaning to say the thoughts of closeness, the thoughts of dveikus, the good thoughts that I want to think, the machshavos tovos that I want to fill my world with, that I want to populate the vacant space of my heart with, are not simply things that are being conjured up through my own volition, but rather they are being sent from you through me back up to you, so that the very motivation that is uncovered within my heart, the very yearning, the very desire, the very chukka, that sense of absolute necessity and urgency to be close to you, that's you speaking through me. And therefore, I have to trust those thoughts because they're not my own thoughts. They are thoughts without a thinker. They are thoughts that are emerging into my mind from that endless, undulating flow of the Nahar Hayotzim Eden, Lahashka Sagan, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're sending down illumination towards my neshama, my chelek Elokai Mimal Mamish, is what's whispering inside of me to come close to you. And I no longer have to question the validity of those thoughts because they're real and they're rooted. And as long as I'm experiencing that thought, then that thought is a full-on experience, as the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh came to teach us, and as the Magid HaKadosh came to uncover deeper and deeper. The Olam HaMachshava is a real world. It's a world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals. The machshava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealed within the machshava of the Ben Adam. And when a person is thinking, a person is there in the place that they are thinking. That b'machkom shel machshavto shel ben adam shamhu, because the thought is a real thing. If it was just a psychological cognitive gesture of neurochemicals joining together to enable the synapses to create a frequency of reason, so then it wouldn't be real, it wouldn't be authentic, it would just be an instrument. By dint of the fact that it is a revelation from you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's what makes it real. That's why when I think something positive, I have to be in that place and realize that it's not the thought that will lead me to that place, but nested and buried within the thought itself, I'm already there. If I'm in that place in my machshava, I'm already there. There is a segula that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created, that there's a metzias called Olam HaMachshava, and that's the place in which the neshama is populating itself. In order to awaken that place of Olam HaMachshava, which lives within our own minds, we have something called thinking. And when we think, we awaken that world, and from that world, there's a secretion of a pre-existent presence of machshavos tovos that are there to be revealed. The machshava is not doing the work for us. The machshava is a segula. It's a key that opens up that locked chamber of the olam machshava that allows the mind to be flooded with the ever-present saturation of godliness that is always already there, waiting to be opened up by this key called machshava. This is what David HaMelech reveals. L'cha amar libi, Hashem, my heart is on shlichus from you. It's not me that's conjuring up this desire to come close to you. And as such, I don't have to give in to all of those skeptical thoughts that are saying, maybe I'm just thinking this way because it's more comfortable. Maybe I'm just thinking about coming close to you, Kadosh Baruch Hu, because I'm anxious. Maybe it's because I'm feeling sad. None of that makes a difference because it's a real thing to come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. I have no reason to question the origin of the thought. If the thought is there and the positive thought is there, then I can take it as a shlichus from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and I can be makabel that machshava. And I can feel that that machshava is a kuma shlema. Rabbi Nachman Mebreslov roots this teaching in explaining this very principle. Rabbi Nachman says as follows, and thank you to my dear friend, Rabbi Dr. Benji Epstein, for bringing this to my attention again yesterday. It's in Torah Kuf Lamed Ches, which we can say is chelek, gematria chelek, because chelek, Elokai Mimal, the mind, the neshama, is that part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu kavyachol that is in a state of perpetual unfolding in a real way, where the goal is embedded within the process itself, rather than some instrumental process that will ultimately lead to a goal. Zakte Heilige Rebbe, he says, L'cha amar libi bakshu panai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my heart says to you by way of shlichus for you that I should come to seek you out. That the motivation of my heart to draw close to you is in fact not something that I've made up, but it's coming to me through you. Perish Rashi says, what's L'cha amar? What does it mean to you? B'shlichusecha, meaning my heart is on shlichus from you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and shliach shel adam kamoso. That when my mind is revealed to be the shliach that it is, ultimately it is just carrying out the thoughts of God through our own minds, kavyachol, being reflected and refracted through the particular valence and nuance of the singularity of our own personalities. Ki ikar ha'elikus belev, because the true place of godliness is within the neshama, it's within the leiv. That the mind is the chelek Eloi kaimimal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu rests within us. As the pasuk says, Tzur levavi, that the makom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the heart. And mishi yesh lo lev Yisraeli ein shaykh lo makom klal, because the heart and the descent into the heart and the thoughts of the heart and the machshavos libo is not simply an instrument that we conjure up. It is the very site in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself, as we've explained elsewhere. Umishuhu bar levav, and someone who has uncovered their heart and revealed the openness of their heart and cleansed all of the negative forms of thinking. Bebechinas libi chalal bakirbi, that we've opened up the heart to be receptive of the flow that's coming from above. Yuchal leda asidos ayedema halev omerlo, meaning we can look at the lave and say that it's a ruach hakodesh that's whispering through the lave. It's almost on the darga of nevuah. It's the divrei Hashem mamish kavyachol, and Rabbi Nachman explains this elsewhere as that which is unfolding in the process of hisboidedus. That hisboidedus is ultimately a stepping aside away from ourselves and losing ourselves in that linguistic flow that opens up the pipelines of the thinking, so that divrei ruach hakodesh can come back down to us. That we become witness to the shlichus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sending through our minds at every moment. My heart itself is the site in which you reveal yourself. This is l'cha amar libi b'kshu panai, meaning my heart b'shlichusecha. It's on shlichus from you, my heart, which is the very presence of you. Kimasha halev omer divrei Hashem mamish lahavein. We have to get to a place of realizing that the good thoughts that flow through our minds are real. They're fundamentally real. This is what we see, and Rabbi Nachman uses as a proof text for this concept numerous times throughout Likutei Maharan. The pasuk in Eov, after Eov goes through his complaining, the kedusha, his bemoaning his lot, Eliyahu, who was older than him, he says, basically, are you done? Are you done speaking now? Because I have something to say. And he answers and he says, that so too it turns out that there's a spirit of God in man, and it is shakai, it is the spirit of God that gives understanding. That's what he says. He's saying that, Eov, I see basically that your thinking is not coming only from you, that there are preconceived notions here. But the Malbim explains as follows. The Malbim is explaining that this pasuk teaches us that nishmat shakai tavinem is that we tend to think that the emergence of thinking is within the psychological or neurological or neuropsychological register of the mind, and that the beginning of thought takes place within the human reaction to reality. But what the Malbim is pointing out on this pasuk is that the rootedness of thought starts far beyond the human mind, and that the rootedness of thought is just like something that is being ne'etzal. It's something that is unfolding from above down below, and that which is being revealed within our minds is not something that has been conjured up in this moment, but it's a flow of that which is beyond us. It's the thoughts that come from Har Chorev each and every day. The thoughts that flow through our minds, the good thoughts that flow through our minds, the good thoughts that we get to think throughout the day, those are real stations and moments of connectivity to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a moment of dveikus. It's a moment of fundamental connectivity, and the oilam machshava is a kuma shlema. And when I live in that place in my machshava, I'm truly there. And if I have another thought afterwards, okay, that doesn't say anything about the previous thought of closeness that I had to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The person's machshava, chashav ma, the ability to think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ability to close the eyes, to lean into the calmness that abides, is not simply some psychological gesture that enables us to be freed from the anxiety-induced nature of this world. It's that also. It brings refuah, but it's real. That's the secret, that when I'm thinking these thoughts, it's not simply a psychological tool. There's an ontological reality that when I am thinking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I am connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When I have emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I am connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Trach gut v'zayin gut. When I think good, it will be good. Not because my mind has any power, but again, there is a pre-existent shape of positive thought ever flowing through the mind that is accessed when we are mevatel our machshavos to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. L'cha amar libi b'kshu. Even my best thoughts are not my own. They're from you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the Maharal explains to us fundamentally why we can use this principle in a healthy way and not use it in an unhealthy way. Because utilizing this principle, we might say that, okay, if my thoughts are directly coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then who am I to sift through my thinking? Who am I to discern a good thought from a bad thought? Why shouldn't I just let my mind, God forbid, wallow in the place that it wallows if thinking is just a natural and undulating flow from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So I should allow myself to open every thought. So Adrabah, Ibcha Mistaber, Rabbi Nachman's language over here is Mishuhu Bar Levav, someone who has done the rectifications and the clarifications properly, someone who has removed from themselves the negative influences of their thinking. Somebody who has gotten over those negative thought constructs and has really leaned into the work of trying to think properly, it's only then that we have the ability of saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, these thoughts are from you. These thoughts are directly from you. But there's a secondary way in which we all get to use this thinking, even if we haven't been able to be mavar ourselves fundamentally, even if we haven't gotten to that place of clarity where I'm freed from all of those cognitive distortions and I'm certain that the thought is coming in clear. And that is when we think positive thoughts and thoughts of Kedusha and Machshavos Tovos and Machshavos of Od Yoter Tov and Machshavos of Nekudos Tovos within ourselves. The essential nature of the divine spirit is our capacity to judge ourselves favorably, is our capacity to reveal the goodness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in store for us through us. So anytime a person is thinking a comforting thought, anytime a person is utilizing their thinking to feel comfort with Emunah, to feel more comfortable with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to feel better about themselves, to enable themselves to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this moment, can be considered a true thought. And if the thought is providing that comfort, which is the true sign, if the thought is conveying simcha, but machshava is osios besimcha, if a person is feeling a good thought and a closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we can trust that that thought is a shlichus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's hirurei tshuva that are always yotze from Gan Eden, always yotze from Har Chorev, each and every day. And the Gra and the Baal Shem Tov and their Talmidim both ask the question, what purpose is there if we're not aware of it? And Zok the Heilige Tzadikim, that any her tshuva, any momentary thought where a person thinks of themselves and says, yeah, taka, I'm a tzaddik, I can be a tzaddik, I believe in the tzaddikim, I believe in you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to do Torah, I want to do mitzvos, I want to come closer. I want to remove myself from anger. I want to eat slower. I want to be happier. I want to do all of these things. In that momentary thinking, a person has seen the entirety of their worlds. That machshava tova now goes back up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's an oilam that we're going to be able to benefit from. Yafa sha'achas, each moment of thinking in this world, good thinking in this world, is real and good and fundamental and ontologically sturdy to the degree that I can say I have met HaKadosh Baruch Hu there. But when it comes to our negative thoughts, we have to assume that those are secondarily imposed and they're symptoms of getting caught up in negative forms of thinking. This is what the Maharal teaches us, that the good things about ourselves we can take seriously, while the bad things about ourselves we have to understand are symptomatic of certain things and they're not the essential nature of ourselves. The essential nature of the neshama is to think machshavos tovos, good thoughts, more and more good thinking. And if we only knew the power of our thinking, if we only knew the capacity to conjure up these states of mind and to live in them and to be there and to value them and to nourish them and to cherish them and to believe in them and to validate them, not based on any external validation, but rather as the very fount of certainty itself, as Rav Kook Schus Yogan Aleinu taught so much, that the hofa'ah of Kedusha within the mind is simply the mind beginning to think, and the trustworthiness of a yid when their mind says something good, that I can be okay in that place. And there's a real okayness. And what this offers us is a real tool of thinking. Thinking is not simply something that works when it works and doesn't work when it doesn't work. Thinking is something that always works. If I think good, it can be good. I am where my thoughts are. And if I choose to jump away from the stuckness into a positive thought, well, in that place I have encountered HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the secret of the Emunah B'Yediyah Ruchanis that the Talmid of Rabbi Nachman says is only going to be revealed towards the coming of Mashiach. Not, God forbid, that the thought is conjuring anything up or that the thought has the ability to do anything. The thought is butal and mevutal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu like every other thing. But there's a segula within the recognition that my thinking is not my own. And when I'm mevatal my machshava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that place of chachma, then hakol nimtak, yesh inyan sheitapech hakol, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealed within my mind. That's the secret of all of the dinim being nimtak b'sheirasham, which is in the machshava itself. When I lean into the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when I think thoughts of closeness to you, I'm close to you. When I think thoughts of goodness, when I think thoughts of connectivity, when I think thoughts of calmness, I am in that place. And if that thought goes away afterwards, then that thought goes away afterwards. The Balatanya says, and the Tolas Yaakov Yosef also says this, that hirhurei tshuva that come from Har Chorev, these thoughts, these thought constructs that come from Har Chorev that enable us to return back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they can either awaken a person or they can cause a person to go and drink more. That's literally what the Todos Yaakov Yosef says, and the later Meforshim and Tanya explain this to be the root of addictive thinking, that these thoughts can destabilize a person. If I don't want to pay attention to the reality of the good thoughts that are flowing through my mind and I want to deny them, I'm just going to go and find more ways of covering over those thoughts that are awakening me to goodness. But when I lean into those thoughts and I can trust them and I realize that the machshava is an olam shalim and that nishmat shakai tavineim and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is breathing my neshama into me kavyachal at each and every moment, and the flowing cascade of good thinking and his kashrus and light and connectivity and hope and warmth and goodness and kindness and openness and expectancy and hope and yearning, all of those things are fundamentally and ontologically real. And after 120 years, we will come to see how each and every one of them are written and engraved within the very fabric and texture of reality, to the degree that Metzius is fundamentally different from the moment before the good thought to the moment after the good thought. When we can lean into that, we can come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with our machshavos tovos and realize, od yoter tov, that if I fell a moment before, that says absolutely nothing about my ability to re-enter into the palace of machshavos tovos right here, right now. And this gives us another insight into the previous Torah of Rabbi Nachman in Kuf Lamed Zayin. Chelke Hashem imrasi l'shmor dvarecha. David HaMelech is saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the part of you within me is telling me to come and serve you. Hainu, meaning to say that the godly part within me, the chelek Eloi kai mima al mamish that's within me, that godly part that's in me, sheyeshli oimer liu malamid oisi l'shmor dvarecha. That's what's teaching me to serve you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not me. My best thinking will not bring me to closeness with you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As Rav Usher Freund, Schusa Ganalenu, was always clear to show in the light of Dovid HaMelech, as Chatasai Azkir Tamid, that if I'm left to my own devices and my thinking is my own, then I'm lost. Az avadati bioni. But the secret of the machshava being a place that becomes transformed into the meeting place with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that in the silent modesty of the mind, the light of Dovid HaMelech can be illuminated, that's the secret of tshuva. The truth of the matter is that Dovid HaMelech reveals this when Chazal tell us that every night at Chatzos, in a time of tshuva, Dovid HaMelech would be awoken from the Ruach Tzifonis, from that northern wind that came to blow the harp strings that were above Dovid HaMelech's bed. Rabbi Nachman explains that those harp strings are the heart of Dovid HaMelech, that there's a Ruach Tzfonis, there's a Ruach Be'enosh, there's a breath that moves through man, which is the thinking, the good thoughts, the connectivity to the Oisios, the Aleph Beis, which holds Elamos Neshamos Velikus, thoughts of Torah, Lishma, the Torah, which is the Machshava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Metzias, which is a commentary on the Torah. Every possible iteration of thinking is a Ruach that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it stirs the heartstrings, and it awakens the heart to start thinking and to start contemplating about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then suddenly it comes to find that the very thing that it's thinking about is in the very place that is doing the thinking. And this is the unity between the thought, the thinker, and that which is being thought, as the Tanya explains and as the Gra explains. The Griz writes that the reason that everybody makes a bracha in Birchas Torah is because there's something called the chefza shel Torah. Whether a person is learning Torah or not, contemplating Torah or not, doesn't make a difference. It's not instrumental information, but rather the mind itself is the shape of Torah. This is the Yud Gimel Midos Shar Torah Nedrashas Bahem, which represent the Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna, which represent the 13 principles of Rachamim, which also represent the 13 pathways in the mind. That the hermeneutics of being is that our thinking is in and of itself the point of revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light in this world, and each and every one of us, every thought that we have is unfolding the never-ending process of Ruach HaKodesh, as long as they're good thoughts, as long as they're thoughts that are bringing us to a better place. And when a Yid listens to this, we become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We stop worrying so much about the validation of our thoughts and about the certainty of our thoughts or the purposefulness of our thoughts, and we're able to lean into this machshava in this moment, and we can see, we can find HaKadosh Baruch Hu right there. L'cha amar libi, you're the one who's whispering to me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to come back to you, and let me own and be confident in the goodness of myself and the goodness of the good thoughts that flow through, and to trust them, to trust that they're real, to trust that they convey a certainty that is beyond grasp. And instead of being doubtful about their nature, just to be in them and allow the good thought to be thought and to take presence in it and to find pleasure within the calmness and the emunah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to feel by thinking about Him, Be'ezras Hashem.